Please welcome to the stage Erin Latimer, advisor of Racing to Zero, and Graham Zimmerman, professional alpinist and director of Protect Our Winters Athlete Alliance, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Jason Kelly.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Great to be back. You can tell I'm talking about sports now because I'm not wearing a jacket. And earlier I was talking about money, and that was serious. I'm so excited to have this crew with us. Before we jump in, I do just want to mention the video you just saw, the Square Mile Relay. We're so psyched to be having it tomorrow. We have a Square Mile Relay participant here with us. There are still spots left, so if you want to lose to Erin, please, you can run with the team or just come and cheer people on. Register, find more info at squaremilerelay.com. All right, that's your public service announcement. Now let's talk about sports. I'm so excited to have both of you, as I mentioned, because as we all think about how to talk about these issues in a world that is very divided and complicated, one of the things we can all agree about generally or disagree about in a good way is sports. Both of you were incredibly accomplished athletes. I want to start, if you could, using a little trick that we use sometimes on TV, which is introduce yourself. Tell us what you do, because I want to understand each of your relationships, not just to your sport, but to this broader issue. So, Graham, let me start with you.
Yeah, I'll start out by saying it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you, Jason, for having us up here, and thank you for everybody for showing up and being a part of this conversation. So my name's Graham Zimmerman, and I've been a professional mountain climbing athlete for the last 15 or 20 years. And what that means is I go to the big mountains of the world with small teams to try big technical routes that have never been climbed before. And it's been a really...
So no big deal.
I mean, it's just what I do. And it's, I guess I could say it's gone pretty well. I've won a bunch of awards for it. We've made a bunch of first ascents that we're very proud of. I've also had some incredible partnerships that I've come away with. And it's also been a place where we've seen a lot of climate impacts. When we talk about the high altitude, high latitude parts of the world, they're places where we're seeing some really, really dramatic impacts. And that's something that I'll share has also been supported by, I actually have an academic background in glacial hydrology. So for me, as somebody who's been going to these mountains, the climate crisis has been something that has been a really big part of my life for a long time.
Right. So, Erin, jump on in here. You've had a similar, certainly similar success and also a similar worldview. So help us understand it from your perspective.
Yeah, so I'm a two-time Paralympian in the sport of alpine skiing. I represented Canada. I grew up in Toronto. And I competed in the 2014 and 2018 Paralympics in alpine skiing. So for those that don't know, it's the event that you go around poles. And it's a timed event. I retired from sport in 2018, primarily because I had the type of sport that you're traveling around the world, going wherever snow is. So inside training is not an option, really like a viable option for alpine skiing. So I wanted to go to university and kind of have those other things that I wasn't able to do while competing in high performance sport. Retired from sport, I went to the University of Toronto and studied environmental studies. And then I started working at a Canadian bank. They had an athlete program, and so I was working there as in an internship position. And then it just so happened that they also had a corporate sustainability team. So I was very fortunate. It was all very serendipitous. I used my academic background, moved into what was going to be a contract role with a parental leave. Ended up working with that team, and then went to a conference recently and got connected with Racing to Zero, which is an organization which helps sport organizations think about and reduce their environmental impact. And so I volunteer with them on the side of my day job.
And so I want to try and stay with you for a second, Erin. I mean, that moment or that decision to sort of blend these, sort of vocations, avocations together, like, what was the key moment for you in understanding it's like, oh, okay, this is the way to do it, and why do you think you made this decision with this specific organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just they were in front of me. I met them at a conference, and I said, hey, this is an important issue that I care about. So I knew that, and we'll talk about it later, like I'm so aware of the environmental challenges in sport, but I hadn't seen any organizations that were Olympian-founded, Paralympian-founded that were working on it. And so it was really just a matter of like, serendipitously were at a conference together, and I thought this is perfect because I had sort of settled into my corporate career. I'd spent so much time in sport that I wanted to really like focus on things outside of sport for a while, but it felt like the timing was really right where I did have the capacity, and I felt like the knowledge where I could sort of jump back in and get involved in something that I felt really passionate about, which was sport and the environment.
So Graham, pick up on that because, you have the academic background as well. What's the sort of key nexus here? Like, what's the key intersection where you feel like you can take this forward in a powerful way?
Yeah, I think that to really describe that, I'll tell the story of how I was pulled into the advocacy space. So I was a professional alpinist going to the mountains over and over again and going to these climbs, pursuing this career and seeing these climate impacts. But because of the perceived hypocrisy around personal climate footprint or carbon footprint, I really felt like I didn't have a place within the conversation around how we take on the climate crisis. And that was something that really that made it so that I felt like I needed to be quiet. And there's an organization called Protect Our Winters that approached me back in about 2015 and said, hey, listen, like with your stories from the big mountains, with this career that you're having in alpine climbing, we would love to set you up to advocate for climate action. And I was like, guys, like, do you have any idea how much time I spend on an airplane? Like, I can't be a climate advocate.
Right.
And they're like, oh no, like we would love to coach you through how actually this is exactly what you should be doing. And the primary thrust of that is that we've been sold this idea that personal change is how we take on the climate crisis, when in fact systemic change is the way that we actually deal with this thing. And that's like part of the reason why I'm so excited to be here is because I think that a lot of the things that we're thinking about here at this conference are systemic solutions to the climate crisis. And just to kind of like talk about that for just a moment, when like if I'm going to talk about things that I can take on in my life, like I could stop flying, I could put solar panels on my home, I can buy an EV, but what does that require me to do? That requires me to spend a lot of money that a lot of folks don't necessarily have. And it requires me to isolate myself from these global experiences that have brought me so much value and so much like visibility in terms of what's going on in the world around me. And that means that what we would be asking folks to do is to either give up a lot of the things that make living in modern society like really, really valuable, or have to spend a lot of money in order to like decarbonize. Whereas if we move forward with systemic solutions, then we move into the space where we can all move forward together. Just like no matter how much money we have, no matter where we kind of sit in the social strata, we can move forward together towards a clean energy future where we can like continue to engage with the things that make living in modern society so valuable.
And so, Erin, pick up on that. Like, what does systemic change look like? I mean, you've been doing this work now. You're in the financial sector. You have this, athletic background. Help us work through that. I mean, this is an audience that is deeply invested in this. How should we approach systemic change?
Yeah, so from a sport lens, there's so many different worlds of sport. So professional sport is like a whole different space. I'll speak to Olympic and Paralympic sport. So right now, unlike the private sector, there's not any regulation really, and so there's nothing really forcing any organization or like major events like the Olympics, the host cities. There's nothing enforcing them to like think about sustainability, make more environmentally sound decisions. So that's kind of like a big piece where they're not thinking about it, they're not forced to do it, and so it's just sort of like out of the goodness of their heart if they are doing it. So the true systemic change would come from that sort of like higher level, so it's an organizing body that would generally come through some sort of like policy or innovation. We're seeing the Paris Olympics, they have sustainability really built into like the core of their event. However, there's nothing to say that like that's actually going to happen in the next event, because again, there's no like frameworks or regulation that's going to sort of incentivize people to do so. A lot of the focus, though, that people often have is like on that individual action, which is, again, like very limited in scope. As like, okay, so what if we just don't do our sport? What difference is that going to make? So I think in sport it's tough because, again, we're not saying that, neither of us, I believe, think that you should just like cancel all mega sporting events, major sport competitions, because they bring so much. There's a huge opportunity in sport to inform and inspire people and organizations to unite, because sport isn't the same as like other realms where it's very politicized and polarized. In a similar way, climate change doesn't have boundaries. It's really a collective action issue. So we can use sport in a positive way. I do, however, believe that there are some changes that have to happen from the top down, that are maybe a little bit more mindful about maybe the frequency of the events that we have. And I'm thinking from like, if you think about all the sports in the Olympics, I don't know, how many are there in the Summer Olympics?
I don't know, a lot.
A lot, okay. A lot of sports. Let's say 30. There's definitely more than 30. So those 30 sports are also independently every year competing and training around the world, in addition to the Olympics every 4 years. So like, then you add the Winter Olympics too. So there's just like all of these different like sport bodies like roaming around, emitting, gathering in large mega events. And so can we do that a little bit more like efficiently? I think we can. Maybe travel a little bit less, maybe more local competitions, things like that. So long-winded answer, but that's what some sort of systemic change would look like from that world.
And do you see, Graham, any impetus from governing bodies, be they, local, national, international, to take up that mantle in your sport, for instance?
It's a really good question. I think that within mountain climbing, there are less governing bodies than there are like the International Olympic Committee. But I do think that within the community of climbing, we are seeing a transition away from people looking at going to the mountains as a place just of escape, but also as a place where we can go gather these stories in order to drive the change that we need in the world. And that really like gets to the core of why I'm really excited to be here and really excited to be chatting with the two of you, is that I see sport and I see athletes as folks who can be these messengers around this work. And a big part of my role at Protect Our Winters at this point is both to be a pro athlete, but then also to help take other athletes on that journey of, hey, listen, you're somebody who goes out and does these incredible things. You're somebody who inspires communities, and you have a career that is based on that. And I would love for you to, within the purview of that career, be advocating for some of these things that matter for everybody on this planet. And sport has this incredible tradition of that. It's something we're bringing into the outdoor sports space at Protect Our Winters, and it's something that brings me a lot of optimism when it comes to where we are going with this climate conversation.
Erin, have you seen any meaningful change among your peers and maybe some of your former competitors that these issues are more front of mind? I mean, have you had experiences, I would imagine both of you have had experiences that sort of force you to think about these issues, right? What's it like sort of because the vast majority of us, I'm sure there are some amazing athletes out there, but the vast majority of us are not Olympians, Paralympians. Like, what's it like on the inside?
Yeah, so I would say I'm very encouraged because now there are so many athletes and organizations like Racing to Zero, Protect Our Winters, who are actually engaging in the issue of climate change. At my last major competition, that was 2018, so 6 years ago now, I competed at the Paralympics in South Korea, and I had shared this anecdote earlier. I was like deeply disturbed because one of the venues that I was using, you don't, as an athlete, you're not always thinking about these things. I think both the everyday person and the athlete are a little bit more critical and thoughtful, like, throughout their life now, instead of just sort of like floating through, like, we're kind of asking like deeper questions of like, what was the impact of this? So in this case, it's pretty obvious. So it was a ski venue that didn't previously exist, and this was in South Korea. They had 2 ski venues. One of them, it was like a forested area, but it had been basically like dynamited, and there were 3 ski runs, and afterwards they were just going to replant some trees. And so that actually, like, there were 500-year-old trees there, and I was competing like a couple of days. So I thought, like, this doesn't seem right that for me to ski here, we're destroying, like, this ecosystem. All of the snow was artificial. Like, that just, like, did not seem right. And then the Olympics after that, which was in Beijing, I believe that 100% of the snow for Alpine was artificial. So in those senses, like, I don't know what the trends are from, like, the host cities. Again, that's why it's very dependent on the host city. But I'm very encouraged from sport organizations who are starting to engage with the issues, athlete advocates, and just like everyday people who are becoming a lot more thoughtful, critical, and asking the right questions, because we should be asking the questions. We shouldn't say, oh, this is a great venue. Can't wait to ski down it.
Right. Sorry about your trees.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about this a little bit backstage. I was just in the Utah Olympic Park, and someone in Salt Lake, which I believe is probably, it's going to be announced relatively soon. They're going to bid for the 2034 games, I believe. Salt Lake City is a place that has still uses every single venue from the 2002 games. So you're starting to see people think about it in a pretty meaningful way. I think LA is going to try and do the same for those Olympics. All right, we have 90 seconds left. We've got a great engaged audience here. What is your best advice as individuals? And again, I'm going to go out on a limb and say sporty, outdoorsy people, many of these folks, how do they best engage with their sports as they think about being a responsible athlete? I'll start with you, Graham.
I'll share that I think that sports give us incredible stories that we can utilize to bring people together. And when I first started in the climate conversation, I was talking about these high altitude, high latitude areas where climate impacts were showing up. And the thing that has changed over the last few years is now that these impacts are showing up for each of us almost every day and in every sport that we participate in. And those stories are a really powerful way for us to build common ground with people around us, bring people into the conversation, and give people a space within this climate advocacy tent, because we need more people advocating. And sports are an amazing way to do that. And that's something I would super encourage you to do, is think about stories that you have, of ways you were impacted, utilize those to bring people into the tent, utilize that to bring people into the conversation, and drive collective action around climate.
Erin, last word to you. You get the final word to the group.
Woo. I would say use your sport to connect to the natural world, because climate change can seem very abstract, but when we're out there enjoying a natural space, it's going to make us feel like we want to do something, we want to care about it. And then the second piece is to connect with your peers, tap into organizations that exist. I think a lot of us have been intimidated to engage in climate issues because we're not experts. You don't have to be an expert. Connect with your peers, or again, those existing organizations, which there are more of, to support and join the cause. And you don't have to have the great idea. You can be supporting the great idea. You could be learning, and all of these things do make a difference.
All right. As Jim Coulter said earlier, let's get to work. Thank you both. Thanks so much. Thanks, guys.